Retaliaka Games. Ooh. Apple cider. It's Autumn's Journey. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a visual novel. I am your host today, Seth Trav, and today I am playing this on the PlayStation 5. We got the code for the PS4, but because of how amazing the PS5 is, you can do just about everything, including Autumn's Journey, which is what we're here doing today. My understanding is that it's a visual novel, so get prepped for Chapter 1, The End of Summer. Sunlight filtered through the airy birch forest as the lush ferns grazed my boots. I momentarily shielded my eyes before I turned north, treading carefully. The muggy atmosphere that had hung over the past few months was now being replaced by the subtle crispness of fall. Though the trees were still vibrantly green, apple picking season was fast approaching for the town of Barry. I cheerfully stretched one arm toward the sky, inhaling deeply. Aura Lee. What a name. And thus my weekly scouting for monsters, bandits, and anything out of the ordinary that may harm local citizens is over.
Right.
And that concludes my mission. I laughed, wondering why I was announcing my agenda to no one. I guess I always just wanted to say that out loud. Walking around alone does prompt you into monologuing just so you can hear a voice. Oh, so vexing, isn't it? I just wish I wasn't restricted to freelance work in Barry, though how long is my training going to last? I'm more than ready for knighthood. I can do this. I adjusted the belt holding my sword, making sure the hilt could be pulled out at a moment's notice. Humming, I decided to meander back to the village by following the thin river down the gentle slope. I loved the terrain here. Not super rocky, but not entirely flat either. There was always an inclination, and higher up, I could get a breathtaking panorama of Barry and its endless orchard. Especially in autumn, when the leaves were so vibrantly red that the entire forest seemed to ignite, and the smell of crisp frost and thick fallen foliage lingered welcomely. It was then I spotted something entirely out of the ordinary near the riverbank, leaning against a birch tree. Thin birch trees were not exactly known to be comfortable resting spots, and I did not recognize the stranger's attire. Hello? Are you a traveler? His face came into view and I realized he was sleeping, but that's not what caught me off guard. It was that ass. He was beautifully he had beautiful protrusions resembling shale shards jutting out of his long hair, right where someone's ears should be, or was it a decoration covering his ears? I suddenly wanted to touch them, but I resisted. If he woke up in an untimely manner, it would be awkward to explain. At first I was about to leave, but then I noticed something else rather odd. For a simple glance, I saw no bags, no possessions, or anything else on him. This place was too far away from civilization for a simple afternoon stroll. Was he mugged? And if he had been in Barry previously, I would have known. It was that small of a town. Curiosity won me over. Hello? A flicker of concern passed over my face. I grabbed his shoulder and gave it a gentle shake, finding his lack of response unnerving. I quickly hovered a hand in front of his nose. Sure enough, he was breathing, and I did not see any injuries that would suggest he was knocked unconscious. After some more feeble attempts to wake him, I decided to improvise a camp. I did not want to leave him unattended, and I knew I couldn't drag his body very far. Tossing down my bag, I went to work. Just set up a camp next to this stranger who's sleeping. There's nothing frightening about that happening. The fire crackled merrily on the birch wood as I opened my cloth, which contained a lump of rye bread and hard cheese. These were emergency rations, lest I was unable to return to Barry. Mother and father were probably worried. Just as I was about to bite into the cheese, I saw movement and glanced up, eyeing the stirring stranger. Setting my food down, I cautiously shuffled over. I had previously placed his body in a supine position, whatever that is, and I used my bag as a substitute pillow. Though it was probably more lumpy than anything else, it was better than nothing. Are you awake now? You've been out all afternoon, and I was getting worried. I trailed off before I started rambling and watched him curiously as he opened his eyes.
Whoa!
Whoa! in a split second, he shot up and then clumsily fell back. I caught his arm to steady him. Woo! Take it easy there. You just got up. He flinched from my skin contact, and I hastily let go, retreating slightly. I didn't get any sense of hostility, but he certainly seemed bewildered. Who are you? There was an uneasy edge in his voice, not quite one of panic, but more of anger. It was then I noticed that his eyes were a brilliant amethyst hue, contrasting with his earthy hair tones. Better to remain calm. Aurelie, I found you in the woods outside of Berry. The surprise did not leave his eyes. They darted quickly to his hands, which then covered his face. Lastly, he ran his fingers through his brown hair. The horror on his face was so unsettling that I dumbly sat there for several seconds before mustering the courage to address him again. Are you alright? Obviously not, but I wanted a better grasp of the situation. He attempted to sit up again, but this time I was prepared. Again, he was repelled by my touch, and I gave up the desire to help him that way. He still appeared unstable, but ceased his sudden movements at least. He actually did it. The hell? He clutched his temples, his fingers grazing over the odd fixations in the place of his ears. He wobbled as he tried to stand, and I impatiently rushed to his side. Stop it! You obviously can't move in your condition, so you might as well just sit down and clear your head. What is going on? Who are you, and what are you doing here? The most commonly asked questions, like who are you, and what are you doing here? He looked at me as if he was registering me for the first time since asking who I was. Everything about him screamed overwhelmed, and he simply grit his teeth in frustration. I feel like asking him if he's hungry is being like he's a dog. I'm going to say nothing. I'm just going to stare into him. I concluded that he needed some time to think and decided not to bother him. Only the occasional crackle of the fire and the hooting of owls interrupted the stillness. He was also examining my every move. It nettled me slightly, but I decided not to comment. I did not want to do anything that would cause him to raise his guard even more. Nettled? It was now dark, and I occasionally fed the fire, getting the feeling I was going to be spending the night. After what seemed like an eternity, he finally spoke up. Who are you again? Aurelie, I'm from the town of Berry. And you? Kerr. He reluctantly uttered the name, grazing into the fire. He seemed much calmer now. And how did you get here? His lips curled, almost smirking knowingly. You probably wouldn't believe it if I told you. You have unusual eyes and a strange fashion accessory over your ears. I think I can find your story credible. He flexed his hand, scrutinizing his fingers carefully. I didn't come here willingly. Out of all the places, I don't see why he decided to drop me in this low-born, simplistic... Kerr? He glared at me as if offended that I had addressed him directly. So, where are you from? I'm not particularly tied to any region. If it's not obvious already, I'm not one of you. He tapped his knee petulantly. I'm one of the dragons, an earth dragon. He stated it full pride with no ounce of humility. Dubiously, I inspected him from head to toe, taking note of the stone, just like juts for ears and his remarkable eyes. He balked under my stare, but quickly regained his dignity. He balked under my stare, but quickly regained his dignity, his eyebrows furrowed fiercely. So, why would an earth dragon be here? It's not because I wanted to, he blurted out angrily, then touched his unique ears for comfort. I sighed, then tilted my head from side to side as I absorbed his explanation. Alright, I'll admit I'm not exactly accepting this as feasible, but I'm not dismissing it either. You can't transform back? If I could, do you think I would remain in this pathetic body? So weak. I instinctively patted my sword hilt to counter that remark, but stopped when I saw him attempt to stand again. Whoa! It was like watching a toddler take his or her first steps, but instead of cutely coaxing, I was fervently discouraging his efforts. We've already established that you're unfamiliar with your form. Besides, it's too dark to walk around aimlessly. I'll find a walking stick for you, and we can return to Barry if you'd like. It'd feel wrong if I abandoned you in this state.
I don't need your help.
Are you saying I can't handle myself? I'm pointing it out. Realizing we were both escalating our voices, I looked away in a huff, not wanting to have our encounter turn sour so rapidly. An altar? I need to find an altar. Your heavenkind worship us, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, the dragonkind were here first, so it's only natural we pay your respects. I admit, I thought dragons were more divine and irreproachable. Kerr was definitely giving me a different impression. I barely knew anything about the dragonkind, though. They focused on their own affairs. You will take me there. It was a plain statement, not a suggestion nor a plea. Oh, why an altar? They're all heavenkind made. How would it help you? He parried my question exasperatedly. It doesn't matter. Do you know where one is?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's one not far from here. There's a cave that leads to it. Relief washed over his face, and for once, his scowl vanished. Good. We should go there, this instant. He obstinately tried to stand up again, but I lunged forward and firmly sat him back down. He gaped at me in disbelief, but my will as stubborn as his. Morning. We will do this in the morning. Get some sleep, and I'll find an ideal walking stick. I don't think you'll master bipedalism without some assistance, especially not in a day. And it'll be difficult if I have to physically support you the whole way there. So, just take it easy tonight. I'll even keep watch while you sleep. Ugh, she's a little bit of a creep, isn't she? A little bit of a creep. After my entreatment, he fell silent and gave a reluctant nod, closing his eyes warily. I sighed gratefully, feeling moderately triumphant over the battle of pig-headedness. As Kerr was grumbling, I leaned over and pulled a small blanket out of my bag. The temperature was still pleasant, even at night, but it could cool rapidly, especially since it was the end of summer. After returning some items to my bag, I reshaped it so it was a passable pillow again and offered it to Kerr, who seemed puzzled by its purpose. Believe me, you'll need something comfortable or you'll have trouble sleeping. Worse, you'll wake up with a sore back and getting to the altar will be even more troublesome. You already slept on it once. I think you can figure out how to support your head with it again. I laughed sheepishly at my own stab at lightening the mood, but I could tell it wasn't working for Kerr. Disgruntled, he laid down on his side and experimented with a few positions before resting his head in satisfaction. At first, he refused to use the blanket, but as the temperature dropped, he discreetly pulled it towards him when he thought I wouldn't notice. Probably to hide his expression, he rolled over so his back was to me and the campfire. I had the feeling the initial shock took a lot out of him, and I admittedly hadn't helped when he ruffled my feathers more than once. Now that he was sleeping, though, any irritation I still felt dispersed along the summer heat. I would need to be mentally and physically prepared for tomorrow, stay cool and collected as autumn. I poked the fire and stayed on my watch until exhaustion beguiled me into resting my eyes for just a few minutes. Hey. Oh, please. I've had less sleep than you, and I'm already energized and ready to go. Pouting, I poked Kerr some more with the walking stick I had fashioned for him. It hadn't been easy to find a sturdy stick in a birch forest, but I had located a long one that would suffice. I had spent the morning carving off any bark and had even indented the top to make it easier to grip. Now, it was my dragon prod. Oh hey, a trophy for participating. And silver of all things. Up, arise, sacred dragon.
Whoa.
Cut that out. Kerr hastily shot up, throwing off my blanket in a feeble attempt to hide the fact he had used it. I decided to counter his usual scowl with the perkiest, most cheerful grin I could muster.
Sorry about that.
It's interesting that her dialogue is different from the words. I feel like it would have, I don't know. My buoyancy was genuine. Buoyancy, okay. For some reason, it satisfied me to know that my vivaciousness irked him. Good lord, who has the thesaurus, is what I want to know. I could use my sunny disposition to my advantage. It'd be better than snapping at him, at any rate. Stop poking me with that.
You're welcome.
It's your walking stick. Here, you're welcome. I turned it sideways and offered it to him. He warily gazed at it, as if I was presenting a cobra instead, but carefully grasped it. Cautiously, he pressed the stick against the ground as he stood up. I remained close, lest he topple over like yesterday. His fingers drummed against the carved handle, and he looked at me quizzically. You spent time on this?
Right.
Well, I wanted to finish it off with a pretty flowing ribbon, but I had the feeling you wouldn't like it. Grumbling, Kerr took a step forward, leaning on the stick before hesitantly taking another. Grumbling, yeah. As soon as he was walking in a straight line, albeit an uneven one. He could not exactly break into a run or even a brisk stride, but it was a huge improvement from last night. I estimated we could reach the cave leading to the altar by mid-afternoon. I quickly packed up and followed him, since I had the feeling the only thing on his mind was that altar. It's this way. I pointed towards a gentle incline, and Kerr narrowed his eyes resentfully. Going downhill would probably be difficult for him. As we headed towards our destination, I kept my distance at first, but I gradually drew toward Kerr, one hand extended in anticipation of a stumble. Kerr balked, and I increased the distance between us, determined to progress on his own. However, his pace was excruciatingly slow, and he was unwilling to start any small talk. As the slope gradually steepened, his footing became more unsteady, and I worryingly grabbed his arm for support.
Whoa.
What? He twirled around in surprise, and I actually did end up bracing him. Once he was stable again, I sighed. Oh, look, I know you don't like me touching you, but if your priority is to get up that altar as soon as possible, I think you can swallow your dignity and accept my help. Besides, no one else is around to see.
I don't need your help.
Brr. You've done enough. I don't need any more help from you. He shifted his weight and started using the stick to ward me away. I frowned disapprovingly. Hey, if you want to try to hit me with that thing, I'll confiscate it. Ugh. Even I wouldn't do something like that. Gritting his teeth, he leaned heavily against one of the birch trees. When I get back, I'm going to give him a piece of my mind. Who? My master. His curt answer stalled the torrent of questions piling up in my head. It would be poor of me to interrogate him when he was still obviously overwhelmed by the situation. Right now, the goal was more important.
Right.
Then let's get you to that cave. You believe me? Everything I told you? Maybe you're just a very convincing actor, but I think even an actor would drop this charade after a while. Charade, perhaps. Just as I was able to reach for him again, a low grumble pierced the forest. I glanced at Kerr in an amused bafflement. He averted his eyes, but I could tell he was embarrassed. If you're hungry...
Shut up.
I'm not. Another complaint from his stomach. I think you'll be able to walk faster if you have something to eat. What do dragons eat anyway? Meddling heavenkind. I rolled my eyes. Well, you have a heavenkind stomach now, and I doubt it'll agree with a diet like that. I urged him to sit down. When he refused, I simply made myself comfortable on the ground first. I unwrapped the cloth and spread the food upon it. The cheese, rye bread, and apple tart. Kerr gave a simple look of disgust, obviously not familiar with them. I selected the apple tart since it displayed the fruit on top, and offered it to him. Here, this is the closest thing I have to something found in nature. I could forage, but that would take even longer. What is that? It's a pastry. My dad owns a bakery, you probably wouldn't understand that. It's basically a treat with apple filling and I think some apricot jam. Or apricot? Nevada? Nevada? Thankfully, my dad preferred showing off the natural ingredients. As a result, the top of the tart had thin slices of appetizing fruit covered with lustrous yellow glaze. Kerr sniffed it warily. It must have been agreeable enough, since he soon accepted the pastry. You're welcome. As soon as he started nibbling on it, he must have realized how famished he really was, because he quickly devoured the entire tart. I watched as he coughed slightly and wiped the crumbs off his mouth, but his expression was unreadable. So, how was it? Anything tastes fine when you're starving. Or you just inhaled it so fast you didn't actually taste it. Well, it could tide you over until we reach the altar. Kerr grabbed his stick and we resumed our trip. The extra sugar boost seemed to lift both the pace and his mood, although he stayed taciturn. As we continued through the forest, I stopped and groaned when I spotted some dark trees. Ugh. Those are Felben trees. Fleben trees. Completely forgot. We should probably go around them. Felben? He peered at the thick, gnarled trunks. What? Scared of the bark? It'll be quicker if we continue in a straight line. No, it's not about the trees. It's about what lies in them. They make perfect nests for avatarals.
The hell?
The hell are those? Those giant bird things? I thought you would know them. I would if I understood your names. Why are you giving new names to everything anyway? We dragons were here first. We've already established. I raised my hand to silence him. Oh, what? Not wanting to make any unnecessary noise, he scowled, but a shrill cry startled both of us. Then what do you call that?
Whoa.
Usually food. Well, that'll be us now. Perched on one of the lower branches was a reptilian bird with scales running down its front. The rest of its body was covered in earth-toned feathers. Though probably no taller than 4 feet, its extremely wide wingspan and sharp talons made it a fearsome animal to encounter in the wild. Avatarals raised young way into the fall, so the mothers would be extraterritorial this time of year. That was an odd... The bird ruffled its plume, making itself seem larger than it was, and perched and prepared to launch itself at us. I immediately stepped in front of Kerr, gripping my sword as I took a defensive stance. With Kerr's condition, an instant retreat wouldn't work. I'd have to guard him. Whoa, what are you... You're not planning to fight it, are you? Do we have a choice? Look out! I shoved Kerr off balance. Thanks to my quick reflexes, he narrowly avoided a slash from the Avataral's talons. The wind whipped at my hair, and debris flew up around us. I scrambled to my feet and sprinted forward, hoping to keep the Avataral's attention away from Kerr. As it dove towards me, I slashed upward. It veered away, dodging my counterattack. Kerr, I'll keep it busy while you get away. Are you stupid? I'm not leaving you behind. Kerr? I need you to take me to that altar. Maybe if you shouted the directions at me, I could get there alone. I'm kind of busy here. I can't get my bearings in the middle of a battle. My aggravation was the incentive I needed to keep the Avataral at bay. However, my training had never covered aerial attacks, and the bird's scaly front was like armor. Are you holding back? Well, it's just protecting its young. It's trying to kill you. You think I haven't noticed? Oh, for the wings. Clip them. It won't hurt it, but it'll stop it from flying. Just clip the tips. I widened my stance as I prepared for another attack. At the last second, I leapt to the side, slicing at an angle. My sword beautifully seared the Avataral's thick primary feathers. The monster swerved into the ground, its shoulder and head bearing the brunt of the crash. He let out a cry, and I felt a split second of guilt that vanished with a yelp as the bird tried to tear me down with its talons. Luckily, the Avataral was designed for swooping down at prey rather than running on the ground, so it could only hobble awkwardly. As it screeched and futilely spread its wings, I retreated, grateful that it was even slower than Kerr. I wove through the trees until it finally gave up chasing me. Then, sighing in relief, I looped back and returned to Kerr, who was also at a safe distance. Looks like it gave up. But what about its young? It'll be fine. The feathers will grow back, and it can still hop back to its nest. Its babies won't need to eat as constantly at this stage anyway. You sure know a lot about them. Thanks for the suggestion. He snorted indignantly. I already told you. They're food. Of course I'd know about them. Soon the forest was quiet once again, with only the sound of our footsteps and the top of Kerr's walking stick breaking the silence. The tap. Surprisingly, he did not protest when I suggested a safer route, nor when I walked nearly shoulder to shoulder with him. I get the feeling that starting a regular conversation would push my luck, so I kept my mouth shut and instead hoped for no more setbacks. This is it? Yeah, it's not a very deep cave. You simply take a turn and the altar is right there. That's it? No complex mazes? No shiny sacred magic lake with a guardian or anything? Hey, we did what we could. This is a modest altar. I took a deep breath and smiled reminiscently. I haven't been here in years. I think I came before to match the occasional offering around harvest season. I gave Kerr a cheerful look, but he continued forward, ignoring my recollections. I shrugged and followed, quickly catching up to him. Kerr awkwardly knelt down before the altar, discarding the walking stick once he was comfortable. His eyes closed with a softened scowl, almost as if he was meditating. Suddenly, his mineral-like ears perked up, and he stared directly at the statue. There was no change in atmosphere, but I could tell Kerr was angry. His hand tightly gripped his knee. I know we're connected. I demand that you remove this stupid curse. He fell silent. I looked around in bemusement, but he was talking to someone? But I could not hear the other half of the conversation. For some reason, that made me even more attentive as I tried to piece everything together. You can't be serious. So I said a few things, but... Huh? Yes, I've met one. That's how I found the altar in the first place. He rolled towards me and blinked in confusion, as if studying me for the first time. I stiffened, wondering why he was staring at me so intensely. Once he finally turned away, I relaxed, although I could not help but feel anxious about the discussion. What about me? Weak, pathetic, gives strange names to animals. Doesn't seem to know much about Ishtara or how the world works. Is he referring to Heavenkind in general or just me? What? I guess their food is half decent or something. What? No. You're not sending me on a pointless inspirational quest. I'm not a child. I can't even walk in this form. So your plan is... At that moment, a blinding light flashed from where Kerr was standing, and I flinched in shock. Whoa, Kerr? By the time I had knelt down and worryingly grabbed his shoulder, the flash had already disappeared. In one smooth movement, Kerr removed my hand and stood up without the walking stick. His eyes still seemed focused beyond me, and he slowly nodded to himself. Did your powers just return or something? He extended his palm and lurched towards the ground, slamming it against the hard stone. Yeah. Ooh, yeah. The entire cave shook. The tremor visibly and mentally shook me as well, and my heart pounded loudly. I felt so paralyzed that I couldn't even scream. Once I found my balance, I looked bewilderedly at Kerr, who smugly flexed his unharmed fingers. I stared curiously at his cocksure expression. So... He barely glanced in my direction. It's not exactly what I wanted. However, a portion of my original powers and strength are back, along with my balance. I can actually be comfortable in this form now. He gave a dismissive kick to the walking stick, then promptly walked away from the altar. I mustered a small smile.
Right.
Well, that's promising at least. What will you do next? Do what he ordered me to do, and become normal again. I can handle this on my own. So you don't need to follow me. I had to anyway. There was only one way out of that cave, but as soon as we were in the open air, Kerr took off running with a grace and speed I'm sure no real Heavenkind could ever replicate. I blinked once, and sure enough, I was alone. I scratched the back of my head, still absorbing what just happened. You're welcome? Burying my head in my hands, I shook out my hair in frustration. Was I expecting something from this? Well, a thank you would have been nice. I tapped my sword hilt for reassurance. It's what a knight does. They help the weak and demonstrate their generosity when it's needed. Well, Kerr's not weak anymore, but he definitely take care of himself now. He can definitely take care of himself now. God. I guess my duty is done.
Right.
Mission complete. Just some experience as a reward and a discarded walking stick. Deciding not to linger any longer, I started walking back toward Barry. My parents would certainly be worried by now. Oh, hey. Chapter 2. Welcome back. Welcome back. That's where we're going to stop it, ladies and gentlemen. Get down in the comments. Be sure to subscribe, rate, like, all those things. Find the review later on. And until then, I have been Seth Trav. This has been the Switch It Up Show on the Preach Network. I have been on the PS5, living alive. Be sure to do all those things. And until then, always practice what you preach.